my commanding officers, "Get me out of here." A few guys made the same plea, but for different reasons. I was begging to go closer to the front. Send me to Garcia. Finally, on Christmas Eve 2007, my request was approved. I was to replace an outgoing FAC at Forward Operating Base Delhi, which was inside an abandoned Garcia school. Small gravel courtyard, corrugated tin roof. Someone said the school had been an agricultural university. Someone else said it had been a madrasa. For the moment, however, it was a part of the British Commonwealth, my new home. It was also home to a company of Gurkhas. Recruited from Nepal, from the remotest villages along the foothills of the Himalayas, the Gurkhas had fought in every British war of the last 2 centuries, and distinguished themselves in each one. They scrapped like tigers, never gave up, and as a result, they held a special place in the British Army, and in my heart. I'd been hearing about the Gurkhas since I was a boy. One of the first uniforms I'd ever worn was a Gurkha uniform. At Sandhurst, the Gurkhas always played the enemy in military exercises, which always felt a bit ridiculous because they were beloved. After the exercises, the Gurkha would invariably walk up to me and offer me a cup of hot chocolate. They had a solemn reverence for royalty. A king, to their minds, was divine. Their own king was believed to be the reincarnated Hindu god Vishnu. A prince, therefore, wasn't far off. I'd felt this growing up, but now felt it again. As I walked through Delhi, the Gurkhas all bowed. They called me Saab. Yes, Saab. No, Saab. I pleaded, "Don't. I'm just Lieutenant Wales. I'm just Widow 6-7. They laughed. "No chance, Saab." Neither would they have dreamed of allowing me to go anywhere by myself. Royal persons required royal escort. Often I'd be headed to the mess or the loo and suddenly become aware of a shadow on my right, then another on my left. "Hello, Saab." It was embarrassing, albeit touching. I adored them, as did the local Afghans, who sold the Gurkhas many chickens and goats and even bantered with them about recipes. The army talked a lot about winning Afghan hearts and minds, meaning converting locals to democracy and freedom. But only the Gurkhas seemed to be actually doing it. When they weren't escorting me, the Gurkhas were intent on fattening me up. Food was their love language, and while each Gurkha thought himself a 5-star chef, they all had the same speciality: no curry. I remember one day hearing rotors overhead. I looked up. Everyone on the base looked up. A chopper slowly descending, and hanging from the skids, wrapped in a net, was a goat. Christmas present for the Gurkhas. In a great burst of dust, the helicopter touched down. Out jumped a man, bald, blondish, the picture of a British officer. He was also vaguely familiar. "I know this bloke," I said aloud. I snapped my fingers. "It's good old Bevan." He'd worked for Pa for a few years. He'd even chaperoned us one winter in Cloisters. I recalled him skiing in a Barber jacket. So quintessentially aristocratic. Now, apparently, he was the brigade commander's number 2, and thus delivering goats on behalf of the commander to the beloved Gurkhas. I was floored to bump into him, but he was only mildly surprised, or interested. He was too preoccupied with those goats. Besides the one in the net, he'd cradled one between his knees on the whole flight, and he now guided this little fellow on a lead, like a cocker spaniel, over to a Gurkha. Poor Bevan. I could see how he bonded with that goat, how unprepared he was for what was coming. The Gurkha took out his kukri and lopped off its head. The tan, bearded face dropped to the ground like one of the taped-up loo rolls we use for rugby balls. The Gurkha then neatly, expertly collected the blood in a cup. Nothing was to be wasted. As for the second goat, the Gurkha handed me the kukri, asked if I'd like to do the honours. Back home I had several kukris. They'd been gifts from Gurkhas. I knew how to handle one, but no, I said, "No, thank you. Not here, not just now." I wasn't sure why I said no. Maybe because there was enough killing all around me without adding more. I flashed back to telling George that I absolutely didn't want to snip off any balls. Where did I draw the line? At suffering. That's where. I didn't want to go all Henry VIII on that goat, mainly because I wasn't skilled in the art, and if I missed or miscalculated, the poor thing would suffer. The Gurkha nodded. "As you wish, son." He swung the kukri. Even after the goat's head hit the ground, I remember its yellow eyes kept blinking. Chapter 15. My job at Delhi was similar to the one I'd had at Dwyer, only the hours were different, constant. Delhi I was on call, day and night. The ops room was a former classroom. Like seemingly everything else in Afghanistan, the school that housed Delhi had been bombed. Dangling wood beams tipped over desks, floors scattered with spilled papers and books. The ops room looked as if it had been ground zero, a disaster area. On the plus side, during night shifts, the many holes in the walls gave a stunning view of the stars. I recall one shift, around 1 a.m. I asked the pilot overhead for his code so I could key it into my rover and see his feed. The pilot answered sourly that I was doing it wrong. Doing what wrong? It's not the rover, it's the Longhorn. The long what? You all knew, huh? He described the Longhorn, a machine no one had bothered to tell me about. I looked around, found it. Big black briefcase covered with dust. I brushed it off, turned it on. The pilot talked me through getting it operational. I didn't know why the Longhorn was required for him instead of the rover, but I wasn't about to ask and irritate him even more. Especially since the experience had been bonding. Thereafter he and I were mates. His call sign was Magic. I'd often pass an entire night chatting to Magic. He and his crew liked to talk, to laugh, eat. I dimly recall them feasting one night on fresh crabs. Above all, they loved practical jokes. After one sortie, Magic zoomed out his camera, told me to look. I leaned into my screen. From 20,000 feet, his view of the curvature of Earth was astonishing. Slowly, he turned his camera. My screen filled with breasts. Porn magazine. Ah, you got me, Magic. Some pilots were women. Exchanges with them went very differently. One night I found myself speaking to a British pilot who mentioned how gorgeous the moon was. It's full, she said. You should see it, Widow 67. I see it through one of the holes in my wall. Lovely. Suddenly the radio burst to life. A shrill chorus. The guys back at Dwyer told us to get a room. I found myself blushing. I hoped the pilot hadn't thought I was flirting. I hope she wouldn't think so now. Above all, I hope she and all other pilots wouldn't work out who I was and tell the British press that I was using the war as a way to meet women. I hope the press wouldn't then treat her as they treated every other girl I'd ever had anything to do with. Before that shift ended, however, the pilot and I overcame this brief awkwardness and did some solid work together. She helped me monitor a Taliban bunker right in the heart of no man's land, not far beyond Delhi's walls. There were thermals around the bunker, human forms. A dozen, I guessed, maybe 15. Taliban for sure, we said. Who else would be moving in those trenches? I went through the checklist to make sure. Pattern of life, the army called it. Can you see women? Can you see children? Can you see dogs, cats? Is there anything to indicate that this target might be next door to a hospital, a school? Any civilians whatsoever? No, all no. It added up to Taliban, and nothing but Taliban. I planned a strike for the next day. I was assigned to work it out with two American pilots, Dude 01 and Dude 02. I briefed them on the target, told them I wanted a 2,000-pound JDAM, a Joint Direct Attack Munition. I wondered why we used that clunky name. Why not just call it a bomb? Maybe because this was no ordinary bomb. It had radar-controlled guidance systems, and it was heavy. It weighed as much as a black rhino. Typically, with a smattering of Taliban fighters, the standard request would be a 500-pounder. I didn't think there would be enough force to penetrate the fortified bunkers I was seeing on my screen. Granted, FACs never thought 500 pounds was enough. We always wanted 2,000-pounders. Go big or go home, we always said. But in this case, I felt strongly that only big would do the job. The bunker system would withstand anything less. Not only did I want a 2,000-pound JDAM on top of the bunker, I wanted the second aircraft to follow up with a 20mm, strafe the trenches running from the bunker, pick off guys as they exfilled. Negative, said Dude 01. The Americans saw no need for a 2,000-pound bomb. We prefer to drop two 500-pound bombs, Widow 67. Not very un-American. I felt strongly that I was right, and I wanted to argue, but I was new and lacked self-confidence. This was my first airstrike, so I just said, Roger that. New Year's Eve, I held the F-15s at bay about 8 kilometers so the noise of their engines wouldn't spook the targets. And the conditions looked to be just right, all calm. I summoned them. Widow 6-7, we're in hot. Dude 01, Dude 02, you're cleared hot. Cleared hot. I went streaking towards the target. On my screen I watched the pilot's crosshair settle over the bunker. 1 second, 2, white flash, loud bang. The wall of the ops room shuddered. Dust and pieces of stone rained down from the ceiling. I heard Dude 01's voice. Delta Hotel. Direct hit. Stand by for BDA. Adult damage assessment. Plumes of smoke rose from the desert. Moments later, just as I'd feared, Taliban came running out of the trench. I groaned at my rover and stomped outside. The air was cold, the sky pulsing blue. I could hear Dude 01 and Dude 02 way above, tailing off. I could hear the echo of their bombs, then all was silent. Not all of them got away, I consoled myself. 10, at least, didn't make it out of that trench. Still, a bigger bomb would have really done the trick. Next time, I told myself. Next time, I'll trust my gut. Chapter 16. I got promoted, sort of. There was a small lookout high above the battlefield. For quite some time, the lookout had been driving the Taliban mad. They had it, they wanted it, and if they couldn't get it, then they were bound to destroy it. They'd attacked the lookout scores of times in the months before I got there. Hours after my arrival at the lookout, here they came again. AK-47s rattling, bullets whizzing by. It sounded like someone throwing beehives through our window. There were 4 Gurkhas with me, and they unleashed a javelin missile in the direction of the incoming fire. Then they told me to take a seat behind the 50 cal. Jump on, sub. I climbed into the gun nest, grabbed the big handles. I shoved in my earplugs, took aim through the mesh hanging from the window. I squeezed the trigger. The feeling was like a train through the middle of my chest. The sound was locomotive-like as well. Chugga, chugga, chugga. Guns spat bullets across the desert, and shell casings flew around the lookout like popcorn. It was the first time I'd ever fired a 50 cal. I simply couldn't believe the power. My direct line of sight was abandoned farmland. Ditches, trees, I lit it all up. There was an old building with 2 domes that looked like a frog's eyes. I peppered those domes. Meanwhile, Dwyer began lobbing its big guns. All was mayhem. I don't remember much after that, but I don't need to. There's video. Press was there, by my side, filming. I hated them being there, but I'd been ordered to take them on an outing. In return, they'd agreed to sit on any images or information they gathered until I was out of the country. How many did we kill? The press wanted to know. We couldn't be sure. Indeterminate, we said. I thought I'd be in that lookout for a long time, but soon after that day, I was summoned up north to Fob Edinburgh. Boarded a Chinook full of mail bags, lay down among them to hide. 40 minutes later, I was hopping off into knee-deep mud. When the hell did it rain? I was shown to my quarters in a sandbag house, a tiny bed, and a roommate, an Estonian signals officer. We hit it off. He gave me one of his badges as a welcome gift. 5 miles away was Musakala, a town that had once been a Taliban fortress. In 2006, we'd seized it, after some of the worst fighting British soldiers had seen in half a century. More than 1,000 Taliban had been subdued. After paying such a price, however, the town was quickly, carelessly lost again. Now we'd won it a second time, and we aimed to keep it. And a nasty job it was. One of our lads had just been blown up by an IED. Plus, we were despised in and around the town. Locals who'd cooperated with us had been tortured. Their heads put on spikes along the town walls. There would be no winning of either hearts or minds. Chapter 17. I went on patrol, drove with a convoy of Scimitar tanks from Fob Edinburgh through Musakala and beyond. The road took us down through a wadi, in which we soon came upon an IED, the first one I'd encountered. It was my job to call in the bomb experts. 1 hour later, the Chinook arrived. We found it a secure location for landing, threw a smoke grenade to indicate the best spot and to show which way the wind was blowing. The team quickly hopped out, approached the IED. Slow, painstaking work. It took them forever. Meanwhile, we were all totally exposed. We expected Taliban contact any second. Around us, we heard whizzing motorbikes. Taliban scouts, no doubt, clocking our location. When the motorbikes got too close, we fired flare guns, warning them off. In the distance were poppy fields. I looked off, thought of the famous poem, "In Flanders fields the poppies blown." In Britain, the poppy was a symbol of remembrance, but here it was just the coin of the realm. All those poppies would soon be processed into heroin, sales of which would pay for the Taliban bullets fired at us, and the IEDs left for us on the roads and wadis. Like this one. At last, the bomb experts blew up the IED. A mushroom cloud shot into the air, which was so dust-saturated you didn't think there could be room for any more. Then they packed up and left, and we continued north, deeper and deeper into the desert. Chapter 18. We made a square of our vehicles, which we called a harbour. The next day, and the day after, and so on, we ventured out to do patrols around the town. Show of presence, we were told. Keep moving, we were told. Keep the Taliban wandering, we were told. Keep them off balance. Overall, however, the base mission was to support an ongoing American offensive. There was a constant roar of American jets overhead and explosions in the nearby village. We worked in very close concert with the Americans, engaging the Taliban in frequent firefights. A day or two after we'd established our harbour, we were sitting on high ground, watching shepherds in the distance. All we could see for miles around were these men and their sheep. The scene looked innocent enough. The shepherds were getting too close to the Americans, making them nervous. The Americans fired several warning shots. Inevitably, they hit one of the shepherds. He'd been riding a motorbike. We couldn't tell from our distance if it had been an accident or deliberate. We watched the sheep scatter and saw the Americans swoop in and pick up the shepherds. When they'd gone, they went out into the field with a few Fijian soldiers and picked up the motorbike. I wiped it down, put it aside, took care of it. After the Americans had questioned the shepherd, bandaged and released him, he came to us. He was shocked. We'd retrieved his motorbike. He was more shocked that we'd cleaned it. And he nearly passed out when we gave him back. Chapter 19. Next day, or perhaps the day after, our convoy was joined by 3 journalists. I was ordered to take them into the battlefield, give them a tour, with an explicit understanding that the news embargo was still in effect. I was in a Spartan, up front of the convoy. The journalists stowed inside. They kept popping up, nagging me. They wanted to get out, take some photos, get some film. It wasn't safe. The Americans were still clearing the area. We were standing in the turret when one journalist tapped my leg, asked yet again for permission to get out. I sighed, okay. Be careful of mines and stay close. They all piled out of the Spartan and started setting up their camera. Moments later, the guys ahead of us came under attack. Rounds went sizzling over our heads. The journalists froze, looked at me helpless. Don't just stand there, get back in! I didn't want them there in the first place, but I especially didn't want anything happening to them on my watch. I didn't want any journalist's life on my ledger. I couldn't handle the irony. Was it hours later, or days, that we learned the Americans had dropped a Hellfire missile on the nearest village? There were many injured. A boy was brought out of the village, up the ridge, in a wheelbarrow, his legs hanging over the side. They were ripped to pieces. 2 men were pushing the barrow straight towards us. Couldn't tell who they were to the boy. Family? Friends? When they reached us, they weren't able to explain. None spoke English. The boy was in a shit state. That was clear. And I watched as our medics quickly began treating him. One interpreter, tried to calm the boy, while also trying to learn the facts from his escorts. How did this happen? Americans. I was edging closer, but I was stopped by a sergeant in his 6th tall. No, boss, you don't want to see this. You'll never be able to get out of your head if you do. I backed off. Minutes later, a whistle and a zip. A huge explosion behind us. I felt it in my brain. I looked around. Everyone was on their stomachs, except me and 2 others. Where did that come from? A few of our guys pointed into the distance. They were desperate to return fire and asked me for permission. Yes! The Taliban who fired were already gone. We'd missed our chance. We waited for the adrenaline to fade, for the ringing in our ears to stop. It took a long time. I remember one of our guys whispering over and over, "Fuck me, that was close." We tried for hours to piece it all together. What happened? Some of us believed the Americans wounded that boy. Others felt that the boy had been a pawn in a classic Taliban feint. The wheelbarrow thing had been a little charade designed to keep us on the hill, distracted, immobile, so the Taliban could fix our position. The enemy had messed up that boy in the barrow and used him as bait. Why did the boy and the men go along with it? Because if they didn't, they'd be killed, along with everyone they loved. Chapter 20. We could see the lights of Musakala in the distance, February 2008. Our tanks were in a harbour and we were eating dinner out of bags, talking in low voices. After the meal, around midnight, I went on radio stack. Sitting in the back of a Spartan, the big door open, I had the desk pulled down and I was taking notes off the radio. My only light was a dim bulb overhead in a wire cage. The stars in the desert sky were brighter than that bulb and seemed closer. I was running the radio off the Spartan's battery, so every now and then I'd start the engine to give the battery a charge. I didn't like making noise, for fear of attracting the Taliban's attention, but I had no choice. After a while, I tidied up the Spartan, poured myself a cup of hot chocolate from the thermos, which didn't warm me. Nothing could. The desert could get so cold. I was wearing desert combats, desert boots, a green puffer, a wool beanie, still shivering. I tweaked the radio's volume, tried to pick up the voices between its crackles and squelches. Mission reports being sent in, info about mail deliveries, messages being passed through battle group net, none of which related to my squadron. I think it was about 1 a.m. when I heard several people talking about Red Fox. Zero Alpha, the officer in command, was telling someone that Red Fox this and Red Fox that. I jotted a few notes and stopped writing and looked up at the stars when I heard them mention the C Squadron. Voices were saying that this Red Fox was in trouble, no doubt about it. I made out that Red Fox was a person. Had he done something wrong? No. Were others planning to do him wrong? Yes. Judging from the tone of the voices, Red Fox was about to be murdered. I swallowed a mouthful of hot chocolate and blinked to the radio and knew with total certainty that Red Fox was me. Now the voices were saying more explicitly that Red Fox's cover had been blown, that he was exposed to the enemy, and he needed to be extracted immediately. Fuck, I said. Fuck, fuck, fuck. My mind flashed back to Eton. The fox I'd glimpsed when stoned from the window of the loo. So he really had been a messenger for the future after all. One day, you'll be alone, late at night, in the darkness, hunted like me. See how you like it. Next day we went on patrol, and I was full on paranoid, worried I'd be recognised. I wore a shemagh tightly over my face with blacked out ski goggles, while keeping my head on a swivel and my finger tight on the trigger of my machine gun. After dusk, special forces collected me. Their Chinook, escorted by 2 Apaches I was chatting with over the radio. They flew me across the valley, back to Fob Edinburgh. We landed in darkness, and I couldn't see a thing. I ran into the fog, then into a green canvas tent, where it was even darker. I heard a squeak. A soft light came on. A man stood before me, screwing a small light bulb into a socket dangling from the roof. Colonel Ed. His long face seemed longer than I remembered, and he was wearing a long green overcoat like something straight out of the First World War. He filled me in on what happened. An Australian magazine had outed me, told the world I was in Afghanistan. The magazine was inconsequential, so no one noticed at first, but then some bellend in America picked up the story, posted it on his worthless website, and that got picked up by the crawlers. Now the news was everywhere. The worst kept secret in the Milky Way was the presence of one Prince Harry in Helmand Province. So, you're out. Colonel Ed apologised. He knew this wasn't when or how I wanted to end my tour of duty. On the other hand, he wanted me to know that his superiors had been pressing for weeks to pull me, so I was lucky the tour hadn't been shorter. I'd eluded the powers that be, and the Taliban, and managed to put together a respectably long stint in a sterling record. Bravo, he said. I was on the verge of begging to stay, but I could see there was no chance. My presence would put everyone around me in grave peril, including Colonel Ed. Now that the Taliban knew I was in the country, and roughly where, they'd throw everything they had into killing me. The army didn't want me dying, but it was the same story as 1 year earlier. The army was extra keen, but others not die because of me. I shared that sentiment. I shook Colonel Ed's hand, left the tent. I grabbed my few belongings, said a few quick goodbyes, and jumped back on the Chinook, which was still turning and burning. Within an hour, I was back in Kandahar. I showered, shaved, got ready to catch a big plane bound for England. There were other soldiers milling about, waiting to board as well. Their mood was very different. They were all jubilant, going home. I stared at the ground. Eventually, we all began to realize that the boarding process was taking an inordinately long time. "What's the hold-up?" we asked impatiently. The crew member said we were waiting on one last passenger. Who? A Danish soldier's coffin was being loaded into the cargo hold. We all fell silent. When we eventually got on and took off, the curtain at the front of the plane swung open briefly. I could see 3 guys on hospital beds. I unbuckled my seatbelt, walked up the aisle, and discovered 3 gravely injured British soldiers. One, I recall, had gruesome injuries from an IED. Another was wrapped head to toe in plastic. Despite being unconscious, he was clutching a test tube containing bits of shrapnel removed from his neck and head. I spoke with a doctor caring for them, asked if the lads would live. He didn't know. And even if they did, he said, they faced a very tough road. I felt angry with myself for having been so self-absorbed. I spent the rest of that flight thinking about the many young men and women going home in similar shape, and all the ones not going home at all. I thought about the people at home who didn't know the first thing about this war by choice. Many opposed it, but few knew a damn thing about it. I wondered why. Whose job was it to tell them? Oh yes, I thought, price. Chapter 21. I landed on March the 1st, 2008. The obligatory press conference stood between me and a proper meal. I held my breath when before the chosen reporter answered his questions. He used the word hero, which I wouldn't stand for. The heroes are the guys on the plane, not to mention the guys still back at Delhi, Dwyer and Edinburgh. I walked out of the room, straight into Willie and Pa. I think Willie hugged me. I think I gave Pa a kiss on each cheek. He might also have squeezed my shoulder. It would have appeared to anyone at a distance a normal family greeting and interaction, but for us it was a flamboyant, unprecedented demonstration of physical affection. Then they both stared at me, wide-eyed. I looked exhausted, haunted. "You look older," Pa said. "I am." We piled into Pa's Audi and zoomed off towards Highgrove. Along the way we spoke as if we were in a library, very hushed. "How are you, Harold?" "Oh, I don't know. How are you?" "Not bad." "How's Kate?" "Good." "I miss anything?" "No, same old." I rolled down the window, watched the countryside fly by. My eyes couldn't quite absorb all that colour, all that green. I breathed in the fresh air and wondered which was the dream, the months in Afghanistan or this trip in the car. Guns of Dwyer, beheaded goats, the boy in the wheelbarrow, is that reality? Or was reality these soft leather seats and Pa's cologne? Chapter 22. I was given a month off. I spent the first part of it with mates. They heard I was home, rang me up, asked me out for a drink. Okay, but just one. A place called the Cat and Custard Pot. Me, sitting in a dark corner, nursing a gin and tonic. Them, laughing and chatting and making all sorts of plans for trips and projects and holidays. Everyone seemed so loud. They've always been so loud. They all said I seemed quiet. Yeah, I said. Yeah, I guess so. How come? No reason. I just felt like being quiet. I felt that place. A bit distant. At times I felt sort of panicky. At other times I felt angry. You folks know what's happening on the other side of the world right now? After a day or two I rang Chelsea, asked to see her, begged. She was in Cape Town. She invited me to come. Yes, I thought that's what I need right now. A day or two with Chelsea and her folks. After, she and I ran off to Botswana, met up with the gang. We started at TJ Mike's house. Big hugs and kisses at the door. They'd been worried sick about me. Then they fed me, and Mike kept handing me drinks. I was in the place I loved most, under the sky I loved most. So happy that at one point I wondered if I might not have tears in my eyes. A day or two later, Chelsea and I drifted upriver on a rented houseboat, the Kubu Queen. We cooked simple meals, slept on the upper deck of the boat under the stars. Gazing at Orion's belt, the Little Dipper, I tried to decompress, but it was hard. The press got wind of our trip, and they were papping us constantly every time the boat neared the shore. After a week or so, we went back to Maun, ate a farewell dinner with Tej and Mike. Everyone turned in early, but I sat up with Tej, told her a bit about the war, just a bit. It was the first time I'd spoken of it since arriving home. Willie and Pa had asked. They hadn't asked the way Tej asked. What with Chelsea? Did she tiptoe around the subject because she still disliked my going? Or because she knew it would be hard for me to talk about it? I wasn't sure, and I felt that she wasn't sure. But neither of us was sure about anything. Tej and I talked about that too. She likes me, I said. Loves me, I guess. But she doesn't like the baggage that comes with me. Doesn't like everything that comes with being royal. The press and so forth. And none of that is ever going away. So what hope is there? Tej asked point blank if I could see myself married to Chelsea. I tried to explain. I cherished Chelsea's carefree and authentic spirit. She never worried about what other people thought. She wore short skirts and high boots, danced with abandon, drank as much tequila as I did, and I cherished all those things about her. I couldn't help worrying about how Granny might feel about them, or the British public, and the last thing I wanted was for Chelsea to change to accommodate them. I wanted so badly to be a husband, a father, I just wasn't sure. It takes a certain kind of person to withstand the scrutiny, Tej. I don't know if Chelsea can handle it. I don't know that I want to ask her to handle it. Chapter 23. Press reported breathlessly on our return to Britain how we dashed to Chelsea's off-campus flat in Leeds, where she lived with two girls whom I trusted, and who, more important, trusted me, and how I snuck into their flat, disguised in a hoodie and baseball cap, giving her flatmates a laugh, and how I loved pretending to be a university student, going for pizza and hanging out in pubs, even wondering if I'd made the right choice in skipping university. Not one word of which was true. I went to Chelsea's Leeds flat twice. I barely knew her flatmates. And I never once regretted my decision to skip university. The press was getting worse. They were now just peddling fantasies, phantasms, or physically stalking and harassing me, and everyone in my inner circle. Chelsea told me that perhaps I'd been following her to and from lectures. She asked me to do something about it. I told her I'd try. I told her how sorry I was. When she was back in Cape Town, she phoned me and said people were tailing her everywhere. It was driving her crazy. She couldn't imagine how they always knew where she was and where she'd be. She was freaking out. I talked it over with Marco, who advised me to ask Chelsea's brother to check the underside of the car. Sure enough, cracking device. Marco and I were able to tell her brother exactly what to check for and where, because it had happened to so many other people around me. Chelsea said again that she just wasn't sure if she was up for this. A lifetime of being stalked? What could I say? I miss her so much, but I completely understood her desire for freedom. If I had a choice, I wouldn't want this life either. Chapter 24. Flag, they called her. She was funny and sweet and cool. I met her at a restaurant with some mates, months after Chelsea and I had gone our separate ways. Spike, this is Flag. Hi, what do you do, Flag? She was on TV, she explained. She was a presenter. Sorry, I said, I don't watch much TV. She wasn't taken aback that I didn't recognize her, which I liked. She didn't have a big ego. Even after she explained who she was and what she did, I still wasn't certain. What's your full name again? Caroline Flack. Days later we met for dinner and games. Poker night at Marco's flat, Brannan Gardens. After an hour or so I stepped outside, disguised in one of Marco's cowboy hats, to speak with Billy the Rock. As I exited the building, I lit a cigarette and looked right. There, in a parked car, he two sets of feet and two bobbing heads. Whoever it was didn't recognize me in Marco's hat, so I was able to stroll casually down to Billy and lean into his police car and whisper, "Bogey at 3 o'clock." "What? No." "Billy, how could they have known? Search me. No one knows I'm here. Are they tracking me? Are they getting into my phone? Flags?" Billy bolted from the car, ran around the corner, surprised the two paps. He screamed at them. They screamed right back, entitled, emboldened. I didn't get that photo that night. Small victory. Very soon after, they papped me in flak, and those photos set off a frenzy. Within hours, a mob was camped outside Flack's parents' house, and all her friends' houses, and her grandmother's house. She was described in one paper as my bit of rough, because she'd once worked in a factory or something. Jesus, I thought, are we really such a country of insufferable snobs? I continued to see Flack on and off. We didn't feel free anymore. We kept on, I think, because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company, and because we didn't want to admit defeat at the hands of these arseholes. The relationship was tainted, irredeemably, and in time we agreed that it just wasn't worth the grief and harassment, especially for her family. Goodbye, we said. Goodbye, and good luck. Chapter 25. I went with JLP to Kensington Palace for a cocktail with General Dannett. As we knocked at the door to the General's apartment, I felt jumpier than I had when moving for war. The General and his wife, Pippa, greeted us warmly, congratulated me on my service. I smiled, then frowned. Yes, they said, we were sorry about my deployment being cut short. The press, they ruin everything, don't they? They do. They surely do. The General poured me a gin and tonic. We gathered in chairs, a sitting area. I took a big gulp and felt the gin go down, and blurted that I needed to get back. I needed to do a full and proper tour. The General stared. Oh, I see. Well, if that's the case, I began thinking aloud, running through different options, analysing all the politics and ramifications of each. What about becoming a helicopter pilot? Wow, I leaned back. Hadn't ever considered that. Maybe because William, my father, Grandpa, and Uncle Andrew were pilots. I was always keen on following my own line, doing my own thing. General Dannett said this would be the best way. The only way. I'd be safer, so to speak, above the fray, among the clouds. So would everyone else serving with me. Even if the press were to find out I'd gone back to Afghanistan, even if they did something stupid again, even when they did something stupid again, so what? The Taliban might know where I was, but good luck to them tracking me in the air. How long until I can qualify as a pilot, General? About 2 years. I shook my head. Too long, sir. He shrugged. It takes what it takes, and for good reason. There was a great deal of schoolwork involved, he explained. Bloody hell, at every turn life was determined to drag me back into a classroom. I thanked him, told him I'd think about it. Chapter 26. I spent that summer of 2008 not thinking about it. I didn't think much about anything, besides the 3 wounded soldiers who'd been with me on the plane home. I wanted other people to think about them too, and talk about them. Not enough people were thinking and talking about British soldiers coming back from the battlefield. With every free minute, I was trying to work out a way I could change that. In the meantime, the palace was keeping me busy. I was sent to America, my first official working trip there. I'd been to Colorado once, whitewater rafting, and touring Disney World with Mummy. JLP was involved in drafting the itinerary, and he knew exactly the kinds of things I wanted to do. I wanted to visit wounded soldiers, and I wanted to lay a wreath at the site of the World Trade Center, and I wanted to meet the families of those who died on September 11th, 2001. He made it all happen. I remember little else of that trip besides those moments. I look back and read stories of the hullabaloo everywhere I went, the giddy discussions of my mother, much of it due to her love of America and her historic visits there. But what I remember most is sitting with wounded soldiers, visiting military grave sites, talking to families swamped with grief. I held their hands and nodded and told them, I know. I think we all made each other feel better. Grief is a thing best shared. I returned to Britain firm in my belief that more needed to be done for everyone affected by the war on terror. I pushed myself hard, too hard. I was burned out. I didn't know it. Many mornings I woke feeling weak with fatigue. But I didn't see how I could slow down, because so many were asking for help. So many were suffering. Around this time I learned about a new British organisation, Help for Heroes. I loved what they were doing, the awareness they were bringing to the plight of soldiers. Wally and I reached out to them. What can we do? There is something, said the founders, parents of the British soldier. Would you wear our wristband? Of course. We wore one at a football game with Kate, and the effect was electrifying. Demand for the wristbands skyrocketed. Donations began rolling in. It was the start of a long, meaningful relationship. More, it was a visceral reminder of the power of our platform. Still, I did most of my work behind the scenes. I spent many days at Selyoke Hospital and Headley Court, chatting with soldiers, listening to their stories, trying to give them a moment of peace or a laugh. I never alerted the press, and only let the palace do so once, I think. I didn't want a reporter within a mile of those encounters, which might look casual on the surface, but were in reality searingly intimate. You were in Helmand Province too? Oh yes. Lose any guys out there? Yeah. Anything I can do? You're doing it, mate. I stood by the bedsides of men and women in a terrible state, and often with their families. One young lad was wrapped in bandages, head to foot, in an induced coma. His mum and dad were there, and they told me they'd been keeping a diary about his recovery. He asked me to read it. I did. Then, with their permission, I wrote something in it for him to read when he woke. Afterwards, we all hugged, and when we said goodbye, it felt like family. Finally, I went to a physical rehab centre for an official engagement and met with one of the soldiers from the flight home, Ben. He told me how the IED had taken off his left arm and right leg. Boiling hot day, he said. He was running, heard a blast, and then felt himself flying 20 feet into the air. He remembered seeing his leg leaving his body. He told me this with a faint, brave smile. The day before my visit, he'd received his new prosthetic leg. I glanced down. Very sleek, mate. Looks quite strong. We'll soon see, he said. His rehab regime called for him to go up and down a climbing wall that day. I hung around, watched. He settled into a harness, grabbed a rope, shimmied up the wall. He gave a rousing whoop and cheer at the top, then a wave, then climbed back down. I was astounded. I'd never been so proud. To be British, to be a soldier, to be his brother in arms. I told him so. I told him I wanted to buy him a beer for getting to the top of that wall. No, a crate of beer. He laughed. Wouldn't say no to that, mate. He said something about wanting to run a marathon. I said if he ever did, when he did, he'd find me waiting at the finish line. Chapter 27.